today's panel is, before we introduce them formally, I've got Gary Jacobs here from Driver Tax, who is our resident and friendly accountant.
Where did friendly come from?
I don't know, it was in the script, it wasn't mine. Okay, and I've got Mr. PC Robocop, PC Dave Humperson, who's always been on our panel. Well, yes, let's have a bit of audience participation. For the last 2 years, anything to do with policing, that's why Dave is up here. I've got Steve Garlick from the GMB, who's not just a great appreciation of the people here. I know Steve will change people's mind. And Steve Wright from the LP, Licensed Private Hiring Car Association. We have two legal brains with us this year. We've got for a guest appearance and hopefully one which you'll duplicate in times to come. We've got Steve McCaffrey, who is from Taxi Legal Barristers. So let's be honest, Taxi Legal Barristers. It says on the tin. Where else can you get legal advice free of charge before you go back to your stand and enforcing the terms and conditions? And I've also got our good old friend Patrick Nolan of Taxi Law, who is also here for legal questions. Our new panellist this year is Dave Lorry. It's all to his CCTV systems. And did I see, have we got Lee Ward in this? Lee, thank you very much. Okay, right, so on that basis, and I've also, for the next 10 or 15 minutes, so anyone who's got a question to ask of our keynote speaker, Dr. Cooper, I know we were snowed on before. He's got to catch a train, and I don't know how he gets it. He's just an Uber getting out here, or just walking. A normal taxi, a taxi out of it. He'll be on our panel for the next 10 or 15 minutes, and he'll give you the nod when he has to go. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We need 9 chairs up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The format is very simple. We have Miss Moneypenny here, who will be among you in the audience asking various questions. But for the moment, can I invite our 9 panellists on stage and a bit like musical chairs. Take your seats now. I think we've got the Okay, now we have some prepared questions. It's quite simple because people are very reticent about asking a question until we get into things. Which my assistant will certainly open the first one to the audience. But before we do that, has anybody, you're all here for the Q&A forum, has anyone got a question to ask of any one of our assembled jury? Not at the moment. Donna, okay, Donna, that's the first question to the panel, to anyone on the panel. I'm sorry it's squashed, but what can I say? Next time we'll get a bigger stage.
Okay, it's a case of who to target first. I think we'll start with Taxi Car, actually. Dave, here we go.
What was you?
Following the so-called relaxation of the cross-border constraints thanks to the Deregulation Act, how is this working in your area now, which by the way is Birmingham?
Dave, here's your mic.
Thank you. Apart from Ron at the back, anybody else from Birmingham? Anybody from Wolverhampton? That's good.
Technically.
You don't count. I'm going to be blunt. The Deregulation Act that came in for cross-border bookings, I think when they looked at it, they thought it was going to be a lot simpler than what it is. And basically, it's just been manipulated by a lot of operators. So if you're an operator, I do apologise. But it's true. All that happens is, as has happened in Birmingham, bases in Birmingham have opened a base in Wolverhampton, and now we've got 1,000 Wolverhampton drivers working in Birmingham. Well, if you're a Birmingham driver and you're paying your licence fee to Birmingham, but all the work's been taken by the Wolverhampton drivers, how is that fair? So I personally think the Deregulation Act for cross-border bookings needs re-looking at, either rescinding or putting control measures in place to prevent this, because it's just got out of hand totally. Now for me as a police officer it's not a problem because I can stop any vehicle, but for an enforcement officer they can only deal with the vehicles that are licensed within their own area. So Department of Transport, that was one of the things that we're going to be looking at, was to give the powers to licensing enforcement officers to deal with any licensed vehicle. Well, 2 years later and they still haven't brought that in. Well, I think they need to. So that for me is, I think they got it totally wrong. I think it needs readdressing.
Okay, I have a question for Gary Jacobs, which I think will resonate in the audience. It's quite simply, has Uber appealed the tribunal decision of October 2016, where it was declared that Uber drivers and workers are therefore entitled to sick pay, and holiday pay and other benefits?
It's interesting because as far as I knew, we were given the right to appeal. We've heard a lot about it, but the hearing's laid down for September, I think. So 27th of September. So there's not really a lot to say about that at the moment.
Okay, I can only ask the questions I've got in front of me.
Well,
regarding, while I've got you
you
here.
can have my little opinion if you want. I've gone on factors saying that it's very important people need to understand that a tribunal does not create. I'm sorry, cutting across my legal friends here, but to my knowledge, it's a simple encounter. The tribunal doesn't actually create legal precedent. You can, even if they've won a Tier 1 tribunal, which I've done plenty of for clients in the past, it means that maybe the tribunal can be mentioned in other cases, but the victory was for a couple of guys and their mates that were Uber drivers, and good luck to them, but the truth of the matter is it's not a judicial thing at the moment.
Okay, well, thanks for clearing that out for us. I've got a question for Patrick before I throw it open, seeing he wants to get involved in this. And do you want to come back to him?
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I, there's two very contentious points at the moment that have been raised, these questions, and are both very current. If just the Uber issue with respect to that, the ramifications of the Uber ruling in respect to the employment are actually more profound than is really understood. Uber have set themselves up, as everybody's aware, as structurally, internationally, effectively, that the fares they're collecting off the passengers are VAT exempt. Without getting into the whole structure, they fall of what's called VAT-MOS rules. So just to give an example, if somebody pays a £10 fare, the way Uber are structured internationally, there is no VAT element because the driver is self-employed, and under the VAT-MOS rules, once the receiving company is within the EU, they can get zero tax rating as they do in the Netherlands. If the tribunal find, and it will be appealed, I imagine, up to the Court of Appeal from the upper tier, that the drivers are actually employees, that changes the relationship Uber have with the customer. And ultimately, the customer paying the fare attracts VAT, even in the Netherlands, because it falls what's called the VAT-MOS rules. I was asked to do something that was published in the FT on this, and we estimated that the ruling could ultimately, and may and could ultimately, if pursued by HMRC, be as much as 600 to £1 billion in uncollected or unpaid VAT. And that is something that is the elephant in the room and everybody seems to have missed out on. Secondly, with respect to and it is very contentious, and at our office at Taxi Law, we get a lot of inquiries in relation to people licensing in Wolverhampton, and I dare say we have helped, I know to frustration to like Dave and one of the companies, almost shop and find a local authority that is business friendly. And I think it's the biggest wake-up call in the industry since Uber have come in, because what happens is many operators are restricted from quite archaic rules and regulations set by their local authorities, and they're frustrated and they can't develop the business for various reasons, owners' knowledge tests, and ultimately now you can, using the Deregulation Act and making sure box A, B and C are ticked, go to Wolverhampton, for want of a better, to choose a local authority, who are, let's say, more business-minded with respect to the way they license their operators. And that's why we're seeing a lot more Wolverhampton registered cars in Birmingham, I know Maidenhead, Canterbury, Newark, Nottingham, and I was in Liverpool yesterday and in Liverpool. And I think it's a big wake-up call to the industry on two fronts, is that the local authorities themselves need to look and review their own terms and conditions and the restrictive nature some of them are in developing, allowing operators to develop the business. And ultimately, I do think it's the greatest thing that can happen from the point of view, it will ultimately have the effect of creating national standards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for
Can
that.
That's
I just
fine.
jump in while James is still here before he catches his train? James, you want to
We-
comment on that one because of the vague reference to Uber, the Netherlands and things like that?
Pay your taxes. Number one, pay your taxes. And if you don't get the same response as anybody else who doesn't pay their taxes. However, there is a point on this trans-border thing that is important. And it is the definition of what Birmingham is. If you look at Uber Birmingham, it's a lot more than Birmingham.
Mm.
And if you're looking at Uber Belfast, it's the whole of Northern Ireland. And when your competitor runs on a multi-jurisdictional basis, you have to do something similar as well. And I think that is going to ultimately impact on whether we allow trans-border operations or whether we actually just define one national boundary.
Okay, I saw this gentleman here want to ask a question, so I'll give you the microphone.
Oh, thank you. I just want to clarify something. I know you gentlemen are the experts in these things. A local council doesn't recognise TfL, for example, drivers and vehicles. They say they're not allowed to come to our town. If they come to our town to operate, they seem to work on Uber, but when I try to put them on our fleet as being a private hire operator, the councillors go at me. Yet I'm left now in limbo. Are they right? Are they wrong?
Does anyone want to come in on
Can you
that?
talk about triple licenses?
Oh, one sec, Stephen.
No, it's not. I don't. Are you saying you're trying to put a London licensed driver on your fleet?
That's what I asked.
No, you can't. There's a triple licensing rule. And part of the way the rules work are you've got to be licensed by an operator in the area, the vehicle's got to be licensed, the driver's got to be licensed.
Therefore, Uber coming down there.
No, the cross-border rules are very different. The reality of the matter is that when the licensing laws were changed, GMB Unite and other unions and other organisations said that this isn't fit for purpose, and the previous government tried to rush them through at all costs without having a real sensible discussion. And the general trade, on the whole, thought they were getting one thing and then ended up getting something else altogether. One of the other things we wanted was to see licensing officers with greater powers as an example. And some of that stuff we're working to address now. The reality of the matter is that what Uber are doing is primarily smoke and mirrors. And whilst the law allows them to do it, it's just not socially acceptable behaviour. That's the reality of the matter. But they're saying, well, our client in London is actually using a London-based app and they're hailing or asking for a London-based driver to come and collect them and do their bidding around town. And the reality of the matter is, it's wrong. We need to then, therefore, change the legislation, as has already been indicated, to be fit for purpose.
In the meanwhile, they're operating by town. They haven't got a license for town, not a city town.
But cross-border allows that, and the rules allow that, unfortunately. As inequitable and as ridiculous as it is, because I have both private hire and taxi members who send me countless photos of London private hire drivers sitting on ranks, sitting outside venues, and some of them are applying definitively when they find they haven't got a job. Where we have a situation like we had in Southend, where there were 5 drivers who had been revoked in Southend, and members of mine come to me and say, we've got 5 people who've been revoked in Southend, how can it be they've got TfL licences in London? And we go to TfL and we say, well, how can this be? Because these people have not filled in forms. 4 people who've done DVLA fraud over points, and somebody with a £32,500 housing benefit fraud. These people shouldn't be given the right to license. They're stealing work from other people. And the whole idea of this pan-national idea where I'll book with XYZ company and XYZ will sub this to another operator within the area, which was part of where it was all going originally, was to regularise that, has gone out of the window with people saying, well, I'll have an unmanned office, I'll have a number that really goes back to my main centre, and we'll send anyone in, because it's not just unique to Uber, there's other companies doing it, and the reality of the matter is it destroys local jobs, it destroys local business, and as you can see in London, over 300 operators have gone because of this ridiculous allowance and this ridiculous set of rules that have been sort of a mix and match of rules, because nobody's really taken notice of the trade over the last few years. It's this wonderful thing of free market, but it doesn't really suit anyone except the consumer, no one else.
So you give me a very confused answer there. Can I ask the policeman perhaps? Is it legal? Is it not legal? Where is the point? There must be a point somewhere.
Okay, I think Mr. Ward wants to answer that as well after PC Dave on Hudson.
How they're doing it's not illegal what they're doing, the cross-border booking. How they're doing it is the customer decides who they want to use. So let's just say, where are you from, sorry? Okay. So let's just say the customer who's in Alcester, Colchester, apologies, are in Colchester, want to use a company that's outside Colchester. Well, that company just comes in and collects them, and that's exactly what Uber are doing. So Uber have probably got a licence in neighbouring authorities that circle you. They're going to have one.
Here's the charm for the
20
or 30 miles away.
Right, but what the point I'm trying to say to you is, it's the customer who's booking it. So if the customer wants to use Uber, Uber can't turn around and go, well, we can't come and collect you because we haven't got a licence in there. Because the law of the land is, you could be in Scotland and you could use a company from Scotland to come and collect you, and there's no law against that. So they're not breaking the law, they're just manipulating the system. But my colleague here obviously wants to just come in on that.
I think Mr. Wright wants to come into this, and then Mr. Ward will carry this on.
There's a lot of confusion here and a lot of misfacts being quoted here. The Deregulation Act didn't cause this whatsoever. The 300 operators that have gone in London has nothing to do with the Deregulation Act. The Deregulation Act didn't change anything in London at all, and people are getting messed up with confusing cross-border with the Deregulation Act. Now, I was an operator in 1973 in London, which was unregulated, and we tried to get the 76 Act in London. We didn't, because the black cabs lobbied against it, and I was always able to operate anywhere in the country I wanted for a booking. So we need to get this fact that the Deregulation Act has caused a problem. It hasn't. It hasn't caused a problem. It's fake news, it's misinformation. What's caused the problem is operators that have got apps that can virtually put their drivers anywhere. And people need to get their heads around not allowing drivers to drive 50 miles from London each day to go and work in another area, and stop going for the Deregulation Act, because the Deregulation Act was a simple piece of regulation that allowed people to subcontract to another operator. It hasn't actually changed the fundamental way that bookings are done. It hasn't stopped 300 operators falling over in London, and people are getting very, very confused. I had a lengthy conversation with the DFT today. The officials are here, and they absolutely confirm my view that it's nothing to do with the Deregulation Act whatsoever. It's to do with the arrival of apps, the way they're scattering their drivers, and the way they're exploiting weak 1976 law. It's nothing to do with the Deregulation Act. So I'm afraid I'm at loggerheads with a number of colleagues here because I don't share that view. I think you need to focus on the issue, which is drivers. I live in a village in Hertfordshire called Bovingdon. Luton drivers come into my village on the Uber app and sit there all day waiting for work. That's what the problem is. That hasn't changed. That was possible before, during and after the Deregulation Act. It's not new. It's fake news that it's the Deregulation Act.
And just find out Mr. Ward, do you want to come in on this? And then we'll move on to the next question.
No problem. Just quickly, the problem that you've got is the problem that a lot of people in the trade have across the country. And similar to what you've just said there, they don't understand the difference between subcontracting work and triple licence rules. That's the big problem. There's so much confusion there that it's affecting even licensing authorities don't fully get their head around some of that. And like you're struggling now, with all due respect, but you're struggling to get your head around it right now, and it's simply that Passengers at Uber open an app. They don't need to have an operator's license in your area of Colchester. They just have to have a vehicle there. That app then selects that vehicle, looks at where it's licensed, backfills the booking to Uber, whichever license that driver is with. And that's how they're getting around it all. They're backfilling the bookings. Most of their offices, especially Rotherham, Rosendale, lots of other areas, they're not even manned offices, they're closed. They advise their drivers that are in that area to go to the next area for any service requirements that they require. So it's all backfill. But the trade really does need to get their head around whether it's a subcontractor booking or a triple license booking. That then makes it easier to deal with the issues that we have in front of us.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, we have some sort of consensus. I just want to move on to other questions, Steve. I've got a question here for Mr. McCaffrey. Quite simply, why are DBS checks so inaccurate? The microphone's coming your way.
Well, we might be about to see a police officer land me one on the side of the face.
He's going to do it first, don't we?
Oh, excellent. Right, well, we'll try and calm it down and we'll get another target. DBS issues, or what were originally CRB issues, have been an ongoing problem in one way or another for years, and it hasn't improved with the DBS scheme coming in. They have been problematic in criminal trials, and I was in criminal defence before I came into licensing, in about 50% of cases where the prosecution, for example, would try and rely on a PNC printout or a CRB to prove, for example, bad character against a defendant or something in someone's past, and they were always disputed in trials. The answer to the question as to why they're inaccurate is because the DBS don't actually check the information. What happens is, and I'll come back to how this has come about. At court, information is entered into the court system, not always accurate, not always even complete. The police also enter information. There is sometimes a correlation between court information and police information, but the vast majority of that which is put into the DBS system or previously into the CRB system comes from that information. There is this idea that the DBS is some form of check on the information that's in there. It isn't. And the reality is, if that information isn't put into the court system correctly, it will not appear on the DBS system properly. The second difficulty as to why they're inaccurate is because DBS is now, not just because they're enhanced, but DBSs now don't just contain convictions. A lot of DBSs contain what is loosely termed intelligence information. So if someone, for example, stood trial for fraud or a domestic violence case or something which is deemed to be relevant to the DBS, the police authority can decide to place that information onto a DBS so it comes up unenhanced. So even if someone has not been convicted of an offence, it appears in the intelligence section. And most people don't understand this. Those are the two main reasons why it comes up. I will just finish on one final point. There is an ability to challenge the DBS and appeal the information from the DBS, and drivers should take a look at that, because if you get a DBS back, even if you're granted your licence and there's something that you question on it, appeal it there and then, because it will continue on your licence, and all that will happen is you'll be asked questions later on as to why you didn't do it before.
Thank you very much. The audience, another question please for our forum. Right, 1 second, the microphone's coming over there.
My question is, we work in Stevenage Borough, and we've got like Uber licensed cars from TfL, Attle's coming into town, sitting in the area all day long. Now, isn't using an app a modern form of applying for hire? Because you get a normal private hire in the old town in view of the public, they'll be done for applying for hire. So if you've got a car that's not licensed in your district, isn't it sort of bending the rules?
Gentlemen, who wants to answer that? Steve? Steve Wright.
Well, very intriguingly, in London last week, the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association arrested an Uber driver for applying for hire. When the consultation was done in London, I was on the TfL board, there was some thoughts about when you are showing yourself on an app, what's the difference between that and having an orange light on your vehicle? You're effectively applying for hire. So the current status of that, if you go onto the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association, they're a 10,000 strong body in London, is they are going to test that in the courts. And if they do, it's going to be a game changer for apps that are working out of area. So the point you're making, just like, you know, why is a loop driver parked in our village that's got nothing to do with decorum, the local licensing authority? And the way this is addressed is not through the Deregulation Act, it's by actually preventing drivers working out of area, which is a great deal of difference from picking up out of area. And in 1998 I went to see Glenda Jackson when they were putting the London law into place, to explain to her that she said, well, if you go to Gatwick from Harrow, Mr. Wright, surely the man at Gatwick will bring you back. I said, no, we've got cars going to Gatwick, we don't want them to return empty. That's a great deal of difference between being environmentally friendly and efficient and actually applying and offering your services out of area. And I would focus the minds of the lawyer and the legal minds and licensing authorities into getting that changed, not the subcontracting laws through the Deregulation Act. And I would like to, you know, everybody to get focused on that, and that's the way you're going to stop people from way outside of your area, whether it's Uber or anybody else, offering themselves in your area. That's to me the legal interpretation that I've got, and it's the legal interpretation that now the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association are going to put through the courts.
I think Mr. Carroll wants to answer this, and
Yeah, one of the things that councils really need to put in, and also TfL, and we brought it up with TfL, is intended use. Unless there's an intended use policy when a driver's granted a licence as to where they're going to work, what locale they're going to be in, this will continue. And unless local authorities wake up and say, you know what, if you're going to licence in Rossendale, then you work in Rossendale. If you're going to licence in London, then your primary objective is to work in London, not to work in Stevenage, or Colchester, or Loughborough, or wherever else it is in the country. And I'll add one extra codicil to this. We've written to TfL and we said, Uber Pool, the sharing service, is an exhibition. Because the moment a driver is POB with a journey, how can they then be able to take on a second journey when they've already boarded a passenger? That's exhibition. That's exhibition, and it's wrong. TfL, after 9 months, have still not given us an appropriate response to that. I, for one, am not going to have it. I can tell you that. And when the judicial review we've just brought comes up, we're going to be asking the question, because frankly, it's not fit and proper.
I think Mr. Sterling, you want to answer that as well?
Just quick, just in relation to the question that was asked, I'll keep it brief. I just mentioned that we were involved in a case, 2013, I think it was decorum, Ashford case. It was a magistrate's court case, but they brought in, it was a test case, they brought in some very learned judges. But it was interesting, one thing that always sticks to mind with the judge giving the ruling at the end of it was, if I make a booking in decorum, I expect a decorum taxi, and that involved the call being taken on a mobile phone, and we got down to the nitty-gritty of triangulation as to where the call was being received. And I often think of this when we talk about apps. I may mention that in passing, but I do know that case is still referred to.
Okay, we've got a question for Mr. Lorry here. Two-part question, Mr. Lorry. Are forward-facing dashcams allowed in taxis? And why can't our council subsidise the cost of the CCTV cameras if they're going to bring them in as a condition of the licence?
Thank you. Both very good questions, and something that we are dealing with. To address the first element of the question, are dashcams allowed? Invariably, forward-facing cameras are referred to as dashcams, which are singular devices which attach your windscreen. They're SD card based and they have sound built into them. Now, up until recently, I was under the impression, I was advising that dashcams are allowed because they are only videoing forward-facing, i.e. the road in front of you. However, recently I've come to realise that they actually include sound built into the device, which unfortunately cannot be deactivated without going into the entire settings of the device. Now, if somebody's being abusive towards you or aggressive, the last thing you want to be doing is say, well, hang on a minute, stop threatening to abuse me, stop threatening to assault me while I just turn the sound on. So, unfortunately, under the ICO regulations, which state that wherever there is audio, it must be disabled, and only activated by by panic switches, dashcams are not allowed under RTO regulations because and only because of the sound. As far as local authorities are concerned, what we as a company are doing is we are trying to encourage drivers and operators nationwide to show a level of interest to their local authorities in the hope then that the local authorities can approach organisations or funding pots such as the Community Safety Partnership in order to be able to provide some kind of match funding towards the system being installed. We've also recently secured a deal with an insurance company in Manchester which will offer up to 10% discount by having the systems installed as well to further financially benefit drivers.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've got a question from Mr. Jacobs. Did you say from there? Gentleman over there?
Sorry,
I think this is directed at
yes, sorry.
Mr. Jacobs, yes?
Regarding the VAT and Uber, if they do lose the case, therefore they are supposed to charge VAT on the fares, what implications would it have on us? Because we use VAT, we use the apps as well. Would we be, all our fares be liable for VAT, which we get it straight on driver's fares? We don't take a percentage.
Okay, you really are talking
Just
about...
before you answer that question, Gary, I'd like to thank Mr. Cooper who's got to get a train. So thank you very much for the keynote speaker. Thank you very much for being on our panel. We'll see you again soon. Thank you very much. Sorry, Gary, you remember, sorry to interrupt you, but you remember the question?
Oh, I think I can.
I'm sure you can. Okay, over to you.
Actually, you really are talking about two different issues. The Uber case it stands at the moment is, from my perspective, I tend to look at things from a micro level, not a macro level, because I'm involved in the day-to-day running of the industry. So the Uber case, as far as I can see, is about driver status and the recognition of drivers working within Uber. The tribunal has recognised them as a worker. As opposed to the judicial VAT judicial review, if it comes through, it will potentially change the face of the corporate entities that deal with this. It's not necessarily going to be change the day-to-day working of operators. It's a somewhat different matter. And you know, at the moment, the law is regarding VAT and status is not clear and hasn't been made so. It's even possible for drivers and individuals to be deemed as employed for status, employed for status purposes, and self-employed, employed for tax purposes and self-employed for status purposes. So it's not necessarily, I don't know if you've got anything more to say on it, but it's, I look at these things from the micro level, from the driver's perspective, from the operator's perspective. I think the VAT case is really about the international application of VAT to a substantial corporation. So the answer is, in the short term, no, it's not going to work do.
Is it okay to talk?
Yeah, absolutely.
My comment was in relation to the international structure that Uber have, and to be fair to my colleague on stage, it shouldn't affect the day-to-day operations of a normal operator. Although we at Taxi Law do help a lot of operators to try and put themselves on the same footing as Uber through some very smart and very clever and very legal structures. But from a day-to-day basis, no, it won't affect anybody whatsoever, unless you're involved in offshore trading and stuff like Uber are.
Okay, our next question. Actually, because you've asked two questions, and I don't mind you asking a third. No, Donna, can you ask the gentleman those, put his hand up to ask the next question? Do you agree? Just make it all very equality.
Yes, aimed more at the legal people really. This is very specific to the council I work under, which is the Vale and White Horse, which is a jointly run council licensing department with the South Oxford. But South Oxford licensing conditions are completely different to the Vale. They set their own fares, we have ours dictated at the higher level by the council. So the same people making those decisions. Morally right and wrong, and also recently, June last year, with no knowledge of the trade, actually outsourced the running of licensing department is now controlled by Capita, and it's supposed to be a not-for-profit, and I don't believe Capita is a not-for-profit company. So are we, or should Capita now be accountable to us, the licensees within the trade, for every decision they make towards our business?
Okay, Stephen, do you want to comment on this?
I think we can agree on one thing. I don't think Capita is a not-for-profit organisation. I think we can deal with that one pretty swiftly. As far as the first one, I hope I understood the question properly. Essentially, what you're saying is there is a difficulty in that the area you operate in has two separate licensing authorities with two separate rules and regulations, and you don't know who you're following.
No, we know which one they are. So
Yeah.
I'm Vale,
Yeah.
and the other is South, but the people in charge, the people who make the decision, tell the operator in South, yes, you can do that, and then the same man turns to his right and says to me, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Because we've got the, but it's the same, and I think that's wrong.
Well,
I questioned it from day one.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's wrong. The lines drawn with the problem with licensing authorities is TfL has it very easy because the boundaries are marked very clearly, and the rules actually within London, even if it's not central London, are pretty clear. Green badge, yellow badge, it's all very straightforward. Once you start getting outside, the difficulty is if you've got a good licensing authority, they tend to be very good. If you don't, they tend to be very, very bad. And the gulf between the two is absolutely massive, with very few falling in the middle. The truth of the matter is, until someone tests it, probably it's not going to be very clear at all. My advice would be to stick to one, obey one, and ignore the other.
Yeah, no, we do. We don't have a choice. It's more the morality of them being able to do that. Is it right for a council to have the same people in place making a different decision?
No, clearly not.
Because they do.
Clearly not.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't have a choice. I'm in the Vale. So.
Yeah. No, clearly it's not. And never mind the morality of it. It can be complete carnage as far as enforcement goes. So it's not anyone's interest.
It is because the boundary of the two.
Yeah.
If you leave Abingdon over the river,
Yeah.
within half a mile you'll now in South Oxford.
Yeah.
Which the nearest town is Dickox, which is another 4 miles, and nobody. So there's that issue there.
Yeah. All I can say is that you stick to wherever the licence applies and ignore the other.
Okay, at that point, I want to get away more of the more questions. So, a lady in front of the blonde hair, have you got a question?
I just wanted to say, from a licensing officer's perspective.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I just wanted to say, from a licensing officer's perspective, that I think it is difficult when you've got one licensing team dealing with two areas, but they're bound to have separate policies, which is why you've got separate conditions. So that's why they have to give each area separate advice.
I attended the meeting of the Joint Council where they completely ignored when we asked them to unify the two, and they stuck certain councillors within one and said, oh, we want to stick to this, and wouldn't agree to bring it in because it's two separate councils.
You need to lobby your local councillors.
Okay, at that point, I've got a question from the gentleman over there.
It's just a general question. We've been talking a lot about the pros and cons of using drivers from different areas. We are national.
When you say we, who?
Sorry, Cabmate are national. We just supply cars, so it doesn't really make too much difference. But it does seem apparent that the licensing of each borough has a massive effect on using drivers from different areas. Are any of the panel aware of any moves afoot to speak to the licensing and make a rule across the board on vehicles, drivers, rates, amount of time it takes? Because the variation is enormous out there.
So one size fits all, is that what
That's exactly how
okay.
we-
Who wants to answer that? I think Mr. Ward does.
I wrote and spoke with Nalio and ILO with regards to some sort of standardisation. I think the best way going forward for that to standardise something is actually the licence for the driver, not the vehicle. That doesn't help you with your industry, but it certainly does help. The vehicle is a tool for the driver. So what tool he chooses to use or can afford to use, I don't see how he can standardise that. You don't get Kogi telling a gas fitter he has to have a particular type of drill or blowtorch. because it's economical depending on area, whereas the actual driver, he's the constant. You know, he's the human being, he's the guy that has to be fit and proper and prove that he can do the job.
Can I, on the vehicle, I understand what you're saying there, but for example, as an ex-driver, 20 years on the road and in the industry now, come up to 30, I know I don't look it, but there you go. The vehicle has a massive bearing. So I'm a driver, I want to work in Manchester City, and they want me to go and buy a white car. They won't let me use a Chiron, they won't let me use this, that and the other. But I'll tell you what, if I go and work for Uber, I can go to London, I can license a Skoda Fabia in blue that I bought from the auctions for £2,000, and I can go and work for Uber in Manchester doing the same job. The ludicrousness between councils, Salford and Manchester are one road away from each other.
Yeah, yeah.
I can license an 8-year-old Zafira in green with pink spots in Salford, but they won't let me take a brand new Volkswagen Chiron that's £35,000 because it's either the wrong colour or the wrong seat layout. Ludicrous, and it does affect the driver. I'm sorry, it does.
I beg to differ on that one,
Well,
like I've just
I think
explained.
I think Mr. Wright wants to answer this as well. So, sorry, Mr. Laurie does first, okay?
There's a couple of issues that you've got with that, because according to the 1976 Act, you've got Section 47, which allows for local authorities to introduce measures or conditions which are reasonable and necessary. Now, if you were to remove Section 47, that would then give you the 1976 Act, which would standardise everything. Also, if you look at the 2010 Best Practice Guide, it specifically states that no licence should be automatically excluded from being licensed. But if you're to remove that, then you're back on the backflip of it, where you have conditions which might be suitable for the likes of Birmingham or Manchester, which are city centres. They're being inflicted on rural communities such as Sheffield or Rotherham or Rosendale, which I heard mentioned before. But you would then have rural communities being impacted by the higher cost for the standards that are required for cities, where they've got universities and airports and tourism and things like that. So while I get your point, and that is something that we are looking at the moment, because we have a judicial review running, you've also got to look at the Regulators Code, and that's a massive tool for the trade, because all licensing authorities now have to follow the Regulators Code, which means that any decisions that they make or changes have to be evidence-based and not opinion-based. So that's something, rather than nationalising standards, we need to be looking at Regulators Code instead.
So who challenges that though? Because drivers don't have the funds to challenge it.
That would come down to associations or organisations, whether it be Alpha or Rosendale Taxi Association or GMB. It would need the support of drivers, because the representative can't do it, because we can't afford to, and to be fair, nor should we, because we're only as good as our membership.
Okay, I want to move this on. Do you want a quick response to it, Steve, before we go?
We spent probably 2 or 3 years talking to the Law Commission to agree about the stupidity of spots, bonnets, stripes, all unenvironmentally friendly, all very parochial and local, extremely confusing for tourism, to try and get some modern national standards and some standards across the piece. Now, we accept that with taxi, it's based on a knowledge-based system for the ability to apply for hire and commuter journeys and various other things. With private hire, you could have a good set of national standards, and some of the things that are done, I mean, Watford's near to us, they have to have white cars. I talked to Cab Direct, who supply, different coloured bonnets and all this sort of thing. All it does is put massive cost, and you talk to someone from 3 miles away, they haven't got a clue what the Watford's colours are and all the rest of it. National standards is the answer. The Law Commission has sat, it sat for 3 years, it's produced a draft set of licensing proposals, a draft bill, and it's been at the DFT, it's meant to be there for a maximum of 6 months. It's been there since it's in its 3rd year. Really, the national standards need to be looked at, and really, it's in a good way that it hasn't completely come in, because you've now got the opportunity to look at the type of things that are going wrong with the apps, and look at the way that app drivers are working out of the area. get national standards in, factor the rules to be modern, fit for purpose, using technology, not stripes, plates, number plate. Every vehicle has a number plate. In real time, you should be able to check where it's licensed, if it's licensed, etc., etc., etc. We're in the dark ages. We're still in the straw on the back of horse-drawn carriages regulation. Is get the Law Commission review to be put into place, get some agreed national standards, and work out these cross-border issues, or rather take it away from cross-border, call it drivers working well outside their area. That will stop all this skullduggery, all the movements, etc., etc. All this red bonnet and blue plates, we've got this logo on the back of our vehicle. It's ridiculous. DVLA, national database, who licenses it, etc., etc. Easy peasy.
Can I just add a really minor point? When a tourist or somebody from Glasgow gets out of a train in London, they may know roughly what they're looking for, but if you get out of a train in Colchester or Southend or Windsor, what the bug are you looking for? If you can't tell who's the taxi, who's the good guy, and who's the bad guy, and who's the local private hire vehicle, what point is it? We've got Windsor Council getting rid of some of these purple bonnets right now, because frankly it's £2 of extra cost for drivers. It is daft. So a national standard, as is recommended, has got to be the way, even from a point of view of rental of vehicles, because the cost of those rental vehicles, when it comes to the driver, then comes on our premiums later. So it's sensible to look at something logical.
Okay, I want to move on. I've got a gentleman on to ask a question over there.
Yes, for somebody with a legal knowledge. We used to be able to go to the Audit Commission, Patrick. We used to be able to go to the Audit Commission to check the finances of the local authority. And in our case, we managed to claim £500,000 back in excess fees that had been paid. I understand that the Audit Authority now is finished. Where can a licensed trade go to get a proper audit of the council's books, and then the money spent more wisely on the things we need, like police officers like Dave, working on the street with a surplus fund?
Patrick, over to you.
At the moment, technically nowhere. However, first and foremost, as you well know, all licensing authorities are supposed to be revenue neutral, profit neutral, and how they allocate their funds or how they calculate their annual fees is set on the services they provide. We used to use, and we used them, I think about 2, 3, 4 years, probably longer, and we challenged the local authority, and rather the same situation, there was a refund due with respect to the funds. To be fair, we haven't, since the auditor's office has been effectively removed, there really is nothing that we can do besides running into the straightforward challenge of litigation, judicial review, and what have you. That's how we do it at the moment, and it is disadvantaged. Now, I do know there's other things in the pipeline, but I could be here all day talking about the suggestions and what's being mooted. But as it stands, it was a fantastic, and it was a very effective and cheap method. But I suppose it's like everything at the moment, cutbacks. It was a very expensive office to run, I think, at the end of the day, were the findings. But unless my colleagues here know something, which I'm sure they do, I'm at a loss.
I think we've exhausted that, so I'm trying to start winding this up. I've got a gentleman who wants to ask a question there with the glasses. Got the microphone? Yes, sir, you.
Yeah, thank you. I work for the licensing authority in Guernsey and Channel Islands. We don't have any of this cross-border agency. We're 9 miles by 4, so it doesn't really come into it. And being a Crown dependency, a lot of the legal stuff can be quite different. But I just wondered, with regard to, we spoke about DBS checks a moment ago. I just wondered, is there, our drivers, we recheck every 3 years. The bus company as well, there just isn't enough people on the small island to employ people locally, so we have a lot of UK drivers, a lot from Hull. There's often a bit of argument. They come to us, we ask for a DBS check on arrival. Some of them will say, well, I only had one a year ago, 18 months ago. We say, sorry, can you do another one, because we don't know if that's perhaps why you're coming to us. Is there a general policy in the UK with regard to rechecking? Are drivers rechecked, or is
Well,
one's
we've got a raft of people want to answer this, so we'll start off with Stephen, then go along the line to Stephen, David and Les.
Well, I'll give my answer and then I can be corrected as we move down the line, as appears to be the pattern. The DBS checks, as I understand it, are required every 3 years in the UK upon reapplication, so including on renewal. And as I understand it, they are valid for 3 months. I'll be correct if I'm wrong, but that is the window. If it is not wasn't conducted and dated within the preceding 3 months of the application, it needs to be redone. Because as far as I'm aware, most licensing authorities will not accept it. But again, I'll be correct as I'll pass it down.
Mr. Garrett wants to comment on this?
Basically, the solution is very simple, and we're asking licensing authorities to take this on and get people who sign up on the DBS to do it. There's an annual renewal service, which is £13 annually.
Is that the update service?
The update service.
Yeah.
If you keep the update service in place, then a driver basically can take that data or the details of the update, pass it on to the authority, and that remains current throughout. Also saves that one-off fee every 3 years in the wait. I did a huge amount around DBS because of the problems we had in London, and did work with the now Deputy Mayor on that, and a whole load of others. The reality of the matter is the easiest way around it is when authorities or when drivers are signing up for DBS, or if you've got staff signing up, renewing their licence, say look to do the renewal option. People will tell you can only do the renewal option once you've got it. It's a falsehood. You can do it at any point in the process. The extra £13 they're going to have to pay for the first year is worth it for the fact that they'll have that ongoing, which means that their licence renewal, or if they're a bus driver, getting them on the road will be almost instantaneous once the licensing, the other licensing functions are fulfilled.
If it's Dave or Les?
Yeah, again on the update service, as Dave just said, we actively encourage all our members to sign up to the update service. Once you've got the certificate, you've got 19 days from the issue of the certificate to sign up for it. It is £13 a year, which over a 3-year period works out at £39, which is a damn sight cheaper than doing the DBS in the first place. And the other vital advantage of doing it is once you've got it, it remains current and is transferable from authority to authority. So, for example, if somebody had a DBS with Sheffield, they could bring it down to Swansea, to Cardiff, to wherever they want, or even to the bus company, as long as it's the same application, so it's for taxi purposes. It's the enhanced check, okay? And it never expires. When you do a check, you can do a check at any given time. You would ask them for the update reference number and a copy of the certificate, okay? And with that, you can log on to the DBS service, you can get an update, you've got the certificate in front of you, and the report would come back, no changes, no certificate required. The only time they would need to redo the DBS is if that report came back and said a conviction has taken place, a new DBS is required. So that's the way around it.
Lee, do you want to comment on this? Has everything been...
Very quickly, the same. I think it's a bit of an half-pregnant process, though. It will come back and say that something's changed, but won't tell you what it is. You know, I think it needs modifying that if you're paying for that update service, the update should tell you what has changed. Not, yeah, by the way, something's changed, so pay us again and we'll tell you.
Okay, I've got a final question from this gentleman over here, if you want to get the microphone. Doesn't have to be the final question, but it seems to be, but please, let's say this one first.
As far as I know, when a passenger makes a call to book a taxi, the private hire operator takes a call and then dispatches the driver. I think Uber are breaking the law on that, where the driver actually accepts the booking and it's not the operator involved. So is there anything that can be done about that?
Yeah, a very good question, and it is something that has come to light recently because Uber were taken to court in Canada, and as part of their defence at the Canadian hearing, they released a statement which explained how their system works, or how their platform works, which is exactly as you've just explained. That the passenger locates the driver, they request the driver then accepts or rejects that booking, which then means that they're in direct contradiction of their operator conditions, because under the operator conditions the driver cannot be involved in the booking process. So yeah, you're quite right. I also, earlier on, staying on Uber, there was mention of the telephone number simply diverting back to the app itself. In our particular case, you may be pleased to know that Uber have an operator's license in our very own council building, of all places. There is no telephone number in there, there's not even a computer in there, which is nothing more than a box they can exercise. So they're not actually operating from their operator's licenses, they're still using the app, they're just using their address.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any more questions for our panel before we wrap it up? Yes, I think we've got one more, yes. 1 second, will the microphone will be coming your way? No, just wait a second, sir, wait a second.
The CRB, the checks in the United Kingdom or in Britain, most of us that were born here can be checked and identified, but there are a great many people in the country coming into the country at the moment that there is no reciprocal exchange of information between the police forces to be able to find out a person's criminal record. And local authorities have been accepting pieces of paper signed by the barman down the road at the pub as being of good character. How can that be right?
Okay, how can that be right? I think Mr. Garrett wants to comment on this.
All I'll tell you is this. Watch out for the Sunday Times in the next few weeks, because Andrew Gilligan's working on something. The reality of the matter is that if you can get multiple versions of a letter of good conduct from the same area in, let's say for example, Romania or somewhere else, there's obviously some kind of an issue. And it doesn't just relate to the private hire and taxi trade, it relates to all trades. And the reality of the matter is, everyone wants to be shown as professional in the trade because we have such a lousy name with a lot of people. And this is the type of mudslinging that makes it even worse. So the reality is, when authorities are looking at a document, they've only got the proof of the document. There's no other way of cross-checking. We've got a huge storm coming over the English language test in London where all of these certificates have gone in, but TfL haven't actually got a mechanism for checking yet whether those certificates are legitimate and whether they can even check whether they're legitimate where they've been issued overseas. And the reality of the matter is there needs to be better checks. There needs to be firmer confirmation, because the reality is that people in this room, it comes back on us. And we're the people who are ending up fighting the fire about the allegations about whether drivers are good, bad or evil. And the reality is, we know for the most part, most private hire and taxi drivers are phenomenal for the work they do. And put under, it's one of the most dangerous jobs on earth, one of the most, for want of a better word, soulless jobs, because frankly you're out on your own. It's not like you've got a group of comrades that you're working with. And when that is damaged by media reports of drivers taking advantage, it does no good to our trade. So frankly, there needs to be a standardised form, I think, that can be confirmed from any police force around the world, that you know this is right and the person is fit for purpose. If you can't prove it, then you just can't drive. Simple.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, can I have the appreciation of our panel today? We have welcome to introduce them individually. We have Mr. Dole and Mr. McCaffrey, our legal brains. We have Mr. Jacobs, who deals with accountancy. PC Dave Humperson. PC, do you want to put the thing down and say hello to everybody?
It's intelligence filming them.
Okay, we have Steve Wright, Steve Garlick, Dave Lorry and Lee Ward. All I would say is, these gentlemen are on their stands just out there if you want to carry on the conversation on any subject. And all I'd say is thank you very much for your participation, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much.